going to the 6th floor to interview the great playwright Terrence McNally. He's one of my favorite playwrighs, and I first encountered his work when I was a teenager, so it's a big deal for me. He is the author of such wonderful plays as Masterclass, Love, Valor, Compassion, Frankie and Johnny and the Clair de Lune, Corpus Christi, Lips Together, Teeth Apart. He's also written the book for Ragtime, Kiss of the Spider Woman, The Full Monty, among others. He's one of those playwrights, I feel like, where you could talk to a random person on the street and you might find out that his plays have affected them deeply and changed their lives. I think he's one of the great playwrights of the late 20th century. Yeah, I'm thrilled to be here.
Coming. Hi. How are you? Welcome.
How are you?
Welcome. This is Terry.
Hello, hello.
Terry the Terrier.
Hello.
It's very important I explain that she is not named for me.
She's not named, she's not Terry Jr.?
My husband had the dog when I met him, and she was named Terry. And I said, I don't think we have to explain it to people. And he said, I think we do. So this is the, officially the office. I have little things that I love in this room, like, you know, this is from an original Thomas Hart Benton, that illustrated version of Grapes of Wrath.
Wow.
And he gave it to John Steinbeck, and John Steinbeck gave it to me.
No way.
Yeah.
When was that? When did he give it to you?
God, many years ago. The first job I had when I got out of Columbia was tutoring John Steinbeck's 2 sons.
Really?
And 5 of us went around the world for a year. Pretty cool first job, isn't it?
Oh my God.
Yeah. And Ganesh means a lot to me. There's me and Tom. And I had to have something of Maria Callas.
Oh, that's great.
And that was a rejected album cover for her recording of Turandot, yeah. That's my high school English teacher who really means the world to me. And she died shortly after that picture was taken.
And you named a character in Corpus Christi after your English teacher, right?
She's mentioned in several plays, Mrs. Mack, Mrs. McElroy. Little tribute to teachers. I try to work into everything because I think they're the most important and underrated and underpaid people in our culture.
And so you write on that computer?
I write on that computer.
And how long have you been writing on a computer? When did you
I
make
started
the
on a
transition?
K-Pro. You wouldn't even remember a K-Pro.
No.
They're about as big as that desk. I gladly leapt to the new technology because I very often would end a sentence just so I didn't have to hit the return.
Yeah.
And now you can sort of, you feel you're typing into space. So
Exactly.
I just love the freedom of it. And I'm sort of compulsive, so if there's one word misspelled or one mistake on a page, I would retype the entire page. And
Really?
I love the fact you can send a script up to the theater without having to get in the subway and be a messenger boy.
Yeah.
So this is the workroom. I also work upstairs, if you'd like to see that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's gorgeous.
And this used to be a bedroom up here. But the owner I bought it from knocked it out. And sometimes I work right here. There's a nice view.
So when you write here and when you write in the study, do you have the wireless on? How do you deal with the internet?
I try to not have it on because it's very distracting. But the wireless part is mainly the flexibility that I can go sit over there.
Right.
That chair, I can sit there.
Yeah.
I can go sit in the bedroom, put it on my lap. Basically, I don't care where I write. I could write on the subway at rush hour.
Really?
Because I don't need mood or inspiration. Because I started, the first jobs I had as a writer was a journalist. And it was before computers, so it was very noisy and people yelling and screaming. And you just have to do your work or you get fired. So I love doing rewrites in the rehearsal room, and people say, how can you write with all this noise? And I said, honestly, I haven't heard a word you've said for the past hour.
Yeah.
And when I write, I make faces, I act out stuff. I see people laughing at me, and I'm used to it now. But I like deadlines. I love the pressure of the theater. Someone said, what's your main motivation? I say, deadlines.
Yeah.
But when I read, you know, like Neil Simon works 365 days of the year, I'm like in awe of that.
Yeah. Do you try to write every day, or
No,
is it no?
not at all.
Do you wait for inspiration to hit, or?
I wait for a deadline.
Yeah.
Honestly, I mean,
Yeah.
it's got to be done.
Yeah.
Once I get the idea for a play, I'm pretty good. But, you know, there'll be days I just want to go to museums in New York, or
Yeah.
I love to travel. I just went to Berlin. I've never been for...
I've always wanted
Who
to
said,
go,
did you write
yeah.
while you were in Berlin? I said, like, no, I can write in New York. I want to see Berlin.
Do you listen to music at all?
I
when you
do.
write?
Sometimes a CD is a good clock. You know, it's like 60 to 70 minutes.
Right.
Sometimes it sets a mood for the play, and I don't even hear it, but I know when I wrote the first act, the Lisbon Traviata, I played Rossini, because that act is kind of opera buffa.
Right. Well, so many of your characters listen to
Yeah,
music and
yeah.
play music and are obsessed with music, so I was curious.
Yeah, so I'm a little obsessed.
Yeah.
But just in the past few years, it's been much quieter around here. Tom has noticed that.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know. Just, I think hopefully we change in little increments as
Yeah.
we get older. One interesting thing about this apartment, Marion Seldes is positive it was Jed Harris's apartment. He was a producer-director. Terry, what do you want, honey?
Just quietly humping.
Girls
your leg.
don't do that. Nice girls don't. So in here, I've got one other room where I can work if you'd like to
Great,
see that.
yeah.
That's around here. Those are my parents when they were,
Oh, wow.
and that's me as a baby. I don't know why. I had to go somewhere.
You have amazing curls.
Yeah.
Those are
Yeah.
incredible. And what were your parents' names?
Hubert and Dorothy.
And how did they meet?
Actually, I put it in a play. My mother crashed a country club dance.
Really?
She was the daughter of a postal worker, and my father was a bit of a playboy, bon vivant.
No way.
So we can go sit over there or in
Great.
the living room and have some coffee or
Ooh,
whatever you
wait,
like.
I want to look at your awards.
Oh, those are
Wow.
Tony Awards.
And
Don't look too long.
Does
They'll corrupt you. They don't really belong here, but I had a fundraiser here, and they asked me, would you please bring your Tonys?
wow.
See, the Tonys have fallen on hard times. This was the first one. They shrink each year.
Yeah, I was just gonna
And they
say.
stopped using two-color gold. And
That's
when
amazing.
you live as long as I have, they reward you for that lifetime achievement.
Yeah.
So the Dramatists Guild gave me
I know.
a lifetime achievement this year, and that was very meaningful because it's from your peers, and
Yeah.
that means a lot.
I wanted to go to that ceremony.
Yeah, I wanted you to introduce me.
Yeah. It was my boyfriend's opening night.
I admire
so
your
can-
work, but I know you're busy, so.
I know, I really.
So we got Edward Albee, not too shabby, went a whole other way, older.
I really like that he was the second choice. That's very.
That's me and Edward Albee back when we both were very young men.
And how long have you known Albie?
Oh my God, Edward and I met when I was a sophomore at Columbia, so that's a long time.
Wow. And how did you meet?
We met at a party that I crashed. Like my
you
mother met my
introduced-
father
yeah,
crashing a party, and I met Edward crashing a party. And then Edward and I, we had about a 7-8 year relationship.
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God, I did
Oh, yeah,
not
that
know.
was
And you
take-
guys are still friends?
Yeah, oh yeah,
Yeah.
good friends. Here's a little more recent picture of
Oh,
us.
yeah.
The opening night of Some Men. There's no rhyme or
Marion
reason to
Seldes.
these. There's Marion and Zoe Caldwell. That's very important. Cheetah Rivera, who's important. Brian Stokes Mitchell, Joe and Nathan Lane, Joe Mantello.
Yeah. And is that you?
That's
a
me.
boy?
What'd you say, me as a boy?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
As opposed to a girl. I see what you meant. We can talk some. Is that good?
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess first I want to know about theater and sort of when you first fell in love with it.
When I was in the 6th grade, I was still at Catholic school, parochial school. And Sister Mary Margaret came in one day with a phonograph, and she put on Puccini love duets. And there were 30 of us in the class, 29 were doing spitballs, reading, sleeping. I was like, oh, this is fabulous. And I wanted to buy records right away, and I got a job at a cafeteria. I was pretty young. I was in grade school. By the time I graduated high school, I had a pretty good collection of records. So opera was always part of it, and listening to the opera on the radio, the Texaco broadcasts. So all of these things made me respect the performing arts. My parents loved plays like Streetcar and Death of a Salesman, and would talk about them and leave the programs out. And my father played Guys and Dolls and Kiss Me Kate a lot in South Pacific. And he loved Edith Piaf and Billie Holiday and Ethel Merman. So I got very used to distinctive voices, which probably is how I ended up being a fanatic for Maria Callas. I like people who sing one note and you say, oh, that's Maria Callas. I like very specific voices. And I think it's all led to who I am as a grown-up writer. But when I came to New York, I went to Columbia. I wanted to be a journalist. And during my freshman year, I think I realized how much I love theater. But I didn't come to Columbia to go to the theater. If anything, maybe I came to Columbia to go to the Metropolitan Opera. I was much more of an opera buff than I was a potential playwright.
And can you describe what you loved so much about opera, even at a young age?
The emotions, and that people wore their hearts on their sleeves. I like frank, emotional stuff. And it doesn't bother me that I could stab myself in the heart and sing a 10-minute farewell to life, because I hope when I do stab myself in the heart, I will have 10 minutes to put it all together somehow in a beautiful passage.
How did your parents feel about you becoming a playwright?
I think they would have preferred I worked for Time magazine. And if I was going to do journalism, it would have been feature writing. I once did an interview with Lyndon Johnson when he was running for the Senate.
Really?
Yeah, and while I was interviewing him, Lady Bird called, and he was talking to her on the phone, and I noticed he was flipping through a copy of Playboy magazine. So I put that in the interview, going, yeah, Bird, yeah. Well, tell them they can't. And he's looking at Miss January, you know. And I thought this was real character stuff. And of course, he called up, or his office did, and really yelled at them, saying, "Who was that teenager you sent to interview the senator? And so disrespectful, blah, blah, blah." But I thought, if he's going to be a journalist, that's the most interesting thing.
That's amazing. That's an
amazing
detail.
Yeah. So I was sort of drawn to the quirky, the more dramatic already.
Theatrical stuff.
Yeah, I wrote the Varsity show at Columbia, and I really enjoyed the experience. I really had a good time. Brian De Palma was in it.
Really?
Yeah. And by the time I got out of Columbia, I was probably going out almost every night to the opera, the ballet.
Yeah.
It was just a big explosion in the arts. Painting, I mean, this was Jackson Pollock, you know, Frank O'Hara in poetry. Everywhere you turned, there was a big scene. At
that time, what plays did you, sort of non-musical plays, did you see in New York that had a big influence on you?
I think probably the John Osborne plays. Pinter was a new voice. Also at the same time, off-Broadway was just exploding. This is part of my education at Columbia, is New York, living in New York City.
And what did you do immediately upon graduating?
I wrote a long one-act play, and I sent it to Actors Studio, the playwrights unit, and Molly Kazan, Elia Kazan's wife, ran it, wrote me back saying, when you come to New York, I'd like to meet with you. And so she said, I have a job here as stage manager. Would you like that? So I was stage manager, and I worked on some pretty fabulous productions that Kazan was directing, that Kim Stanley, Geraldine Page was in. I used to love to get Marilyn Monroe a nice seat when she came, because everyone else treated her very, like they just ignored her. You know, she's a movie star. And Miss Monroe, here's a seat for you. And so I had this great job, and I really saw how plays are sort of put together and rehearsed. And while I was there, I wrote my first play in Things That Go Bump in the Night, and we performed an act of it at the Playwrights Unit, and someone in the audience was from the Ford Foundation, and they said, we're starting a new program. We're going to pay the Guthrie Theater to do new American plays off-season. And producers saw it from New York, and we did it on Broadway in '64.
So your first produced play was also your Broadway debut?
Yes.
Wow.
Which is pretty...
And how did that, are you
that
glad
just wouldn't
that
happen
it happened?
anymore.
Yeah, that wouldn't happen anymore. Are you glad that it happened that way? Was it a huge shock?
That's a hard question to answer, because it's like the movie version. So, of course, it should have been a huge hit, and it was quite the opposite. It was a rather legendary fiasco. I don't know if I ever would have written another play if it had closed in one night, which was very common in those days. Ted Mann was one of the producers of this. He said, we came in under budget, got 30,000 left. He said, I want to try running the play for the next 2.5 weeks. I'm going to charge $1 a ticket, and on Friday and Saturday night, I'm going to charge $2, and we'll see what happens. And I was terrified no one would come, even at $1. That's how bad the reviews were. And we sold out for 2.5 weeks, and there are people who loved the play, there are people who hated the play. There were fistfights in the audience. One
and
night
what do you
someone...
think upset people so much?
The sexuality. It was very graphic and frank depiction of two gay men and, a mother who accepted the fact. It's a strange play. It's in 3 acts. It's 3 hours long, and looks like the kind of first play someone who just got out of Columbia 2 years before, who was PhD, Phi Beta Kappa, cum laude, whatever, would write. It showed how smart I was about everything in the world. It's a real end-of-the-world play. You know what's wrong with Western civilization? This play will tell you. It's a little, but there were wonderful things in it.
Yeah, and was it...
And I would have thought the critics would have said, it doesn't really work. It's sort of all over the place.
Yeah.
It's a talented young person. Instead, one review literally began, the American theater would be a healthier place today if Terrence McNally's parents had smothered him in his cradle. I mean, the play really was wow.
That's so interesting.
I have not had that kind of reaction until Corpus Christi, many years later, 40 years later.
Interesting. And was that one of the first plays on Broadway with openly gay characters?
I think it was maybe the first play on Broadway where gay characters had sex.
Yeah.
Were not there to commit suicide or provide comic relief.
Right.
It was just what they did.
Right.
And it was, I think it was frank in a way about sexuality that annoyed people.
So that was sort of your first big break, and then you...
Yeah, and then I went back to, because I could write, I got a job on the magazines and supported myself as a writer. And then I, met an actor, a character actor, very large man called Jimmy Coco, who I thought was just a genius in everything I saw. And I wrote a play for him called Next. And he said, how are we going to get it done? I'm a nobody. You're a failure. He called. He said, I gave your script to Elaine May, and she loves it. She wants to direct it. And from the time it opened, I've earned my living as a writer, because it was a big hit. It ran for about 3 years. It ran off-Broadway, and it was done everywhere. And people say, where did you learn about playwriting? I said, I learned from one person, Elaine May.
Wow.
Working with her was an education that Columbia could not have given me. She kept saying, I don't care about your dialogue, and I used to really be upset. What are they doing? Playwriting is the act of recording what people are doing, not what they're saying. And I thought about that. At first I was like, oh, I've got a director who doesn't like dialogue. And then I say what she meant was, if you know what your characters are doing, the dialogue comes very easily. I think it's really important to work with people you perceive of as smarter than you, and you learn something. But the main thing is to work with good actors, and you only learn how good your play is by working with good actors.
Yeah.
And I'm really kind of merciless about getting the right cast for a play.
Finding your voice is such a cheesy term, but do you feel like there was a point at which you sort of found the writer that you are now, or if you're constantly changing?
Well, I think finding your authenticity as a human being is so important, and you do it, if you're blessed, you do it early in your life. If I have any criticism of things that go bump in the night, it's probably too much influenced by the sound of Edward Albee's dialogue. Whereas by Next, I think I'd found my own voice. So no one else could have written Next but me.
Yeah.
Someone else could have written some of the dialogue in and Things That Go Bump in the Night.
That's
and when
a good way to put it, yeah.
I think I am very lucky that I came to terms with my sexuality at a very early age. So I never went through that, I'm closeted, people are going to find out I'm gay.
Or when am I going to write my first gay play?
Yeah, I mean, my first play was gay, and then that gave me the freedom to then write Frankie and Johnny and plays that aren't gay. So I was really blessed that way. And again, I go back to like a high school English teacher who didn't encourage me to be gay, but she encouraged me to be myself, which included being gay. And she also taught me to love Shakespeare, and I can think of no better role model for a playwright or model than Shakespeare, and that his characters all have their own sound. I mean, and he also writes his people quite objectively, not subjectively. And my early work, I think, suffers a little bit from writing my opinions of the characters, my opinions of the situation. And there, my second god playwright is Chekhov. You know, he really is not in his plays.
Well, I mean, one thing I'm curious about, your plays are so hard to categorize in a way that I really love. They're like completely unconventional, and I feel like in every play I've read of yours, you play with form, and half of the time you're breaking the fourth wall, and you know, there's this beautiful moment, one of my favorite moments in your plays in Love, Valor, Compassion, when the blind character falls off the stage, and then he says to the audience in the theater, "Don't help me, I can do it myself," and he gets back on the stage. And you know, did you know when you started writing that play, did you know you wanted to do that? When did you first break I'm asking you like 10 questions in a row.
I know. I'd say most of it happens when I'm sitting with my fingers on the keyboard and in the moment. I try to think like an actor. I try to be spontaneous. I don't have an agenda, but then I'll redo the scene 4 or 5 times. And then my first draft, what I call a first draft that I'd let you read, really maybe is a third draft because I've gone over each scene. But I guess my aesthetic of theater, I love theater. I think it's totally artificial. But I think the reality of theater can be more meaningful than reality. When people said Frankie and Johnny, Terrence McNally wrote his first naturalistic play. That's only because they cook in it and
they seem there's no direct address and
Right, but I think it's a very poetic play, and no one behaves that way really. And maybe that's the opera influence. I know I'm in a theater, and the actors I write most successfully for are the Zoe Caldwells, the Nathan Lanes, the Ethel Mermans, the Gertrude Lawrences, who are presences. And they always know they're on a stage. To me, theater gets realer than reality. It transcends. It can really show us what it's like to die and to love and all that things. But I'm watching a play.
Yeah.
And so when I break the fourth wall, maybe I'm reminding myself. Every play sort of surprises me. If I have anything I don't want to do, it's repeat myself. So when people say it's hard to pigeonhole the kind of play I write, I take that as a compliment because I have sort of worked at that. I also think when you write a play and it's successful, it does not help you to write the next play. I think we start again with a blank page or a blank screen, but I do have fun writing them. I love writing the first draft. I think a first draft is kind of easy. The men from the boys found out and rewrite.
And how do you deal with feedback with rewrites? Do you have like a select group of peers who you listen to and sort of ignore everyone else?
A select group of peers.
Yeah.
Again, go back to work with people that are smarter than you. Because also those are people who can tell you, this play really doesn't work in a way that doesn't sound like, I hate you, you should die. You really hear them saying, this play is not working. Maybe this is something you should think about.
Yeah.
Because basically when someone gives you negative criticism, you sort of hear, I hate you. Or, you know, it's very hard. They didn't say I hate you. They said they didn't think the third act worked. There's a big difference. But it takes a lot of living and growing up to be that person. One story which I love is I was doing a show in San Diego at the Old Globe, and I was in the bathroom in one of the stalls, and I heard the producer, and I recognized his voice at the urinal, and I heard him saying to the guy, so what do you think of the show? And the guy ventured his opinion and heard the 2 urinals flush, and they left. And then I went out, and he was waiting. Terrence, you know, I've been thinking for months now. That scene, and he quoted exactly what this stranger had told him, you know, at the urinal. And I thought, this is why you have to be careful who you listen to.
Oh my God.
And basically, you do not need critics to tell you this play is successful.
Yeah.
You can tell by sitting in the last row or standing at the back of the theater by the way they breathe or don't breathe or rustle or any of that.
Yeah.
So the problem is, I would say the audience is the last character added to the play. They get added at the first preview, and then the press is usually coming in a week or two. So it gets very hard. So I try to get my plays in as good a shape as I can through readings. I like workshops, but I certainly would not go into rehearsal with the first draft It's also, you sort of have more time now because getting plays on has slowed down the process. It's just gotten slow, and workshop dramaturgs are a new person
strange profession
in the theater scene. Yes, and
yeah.
they have notes and concerns, and I think it's because it's so expensive. The stakes are so high. Everyone's very cautious, and and you can hedge your bets all you want. You still don't know what's going to happen when that play hits a real paying audience. Theater is so fragile. I don't think people get how fragile, how hard it is. And, I know I've seen Masterclass so many theaters now in French, German, Greek, Japanese. But one of the reasons you're seeing it all over the world is because Zoe Caldwell did it the first time.
Yeah.
And she transcended the play. I saw a production of it at a regional theater a year ago, and the woman was fine, but if she had opened that play in New York and given that performance,
Right.
I would not have seen it in Japan, Greece, Rio de Janeiro, Buenos Aires. So it's also important getting the people together. And if I have any regret about what's happened to the theater since, and this is my 6th decade that I'm working in New York, I realize. The biggest change I've seen is the talent pool has shrunk so much. There was just this wonderful body of actors who lived in New York who only did plays.
And now everybody's flying to LA half the
Everybody's
time.
looking to get that series, a part in a movie.
Did you ever do that? Did you ever spend?
I've written screenplays of 3 of my plays have been filmed. And I wrote a movie script for Barbra Streisand I thought was really good, and I had fun writing it and was proud of it. And she decided not to do it, and I got paid, but the work vanished somewhere in the vaults of Barwood Productions. And
Right.
so I have so many friends who are screenwriters who are really good, and if 1 out of 10 movies they write gets made,
Right,
they're
you're
happy.
incredibly lucky, yeah.
Yeah, and whereas every play I've written has been produced.
Well, and you've had such a wonderful relationship with Manhattan Theater Club.
Yeah, I think it's another thing, if you can find an artistic home,
Yeah.
that is so important for a writer. I mean,
Yeah.
all the famous great playwrights all had a theater.
Yeah.
As recently as Brecht and back to Shakespeare,
Yeah.
they all had a company of actors they wrote for. I think that is
And
so
I think that's
important.
rarer and rarer now
Because
and harder to find.
Our
Yeah.
friends get successful, and suddenly they're off doing a series, they're doing movies.
Right.
And theater is hard work. I absolutely agree. Show up 8 shows a week is tiring. It's brutal. I don't care what you're paid. And movies are kind of glamorous. You go to locations, you do it once, maybe you have to do 18 takes, but when you get the right take, it's done. I think a lot of talent wants to make movies because they are relevant and exciting and good.
Yeah.
But I think theater can still be that, but we need people to stay put and make good theater.
Yeah.
And we need good producers, good designers, good actors, good directors, good audiences, but we really need some good producers, I think. And it can be done. I mean, when people say the theater's over, I really say, you are so wrong.
Yeah.
And when you say that, by putting that negative message out there, you are helping it to make it a little more
exactly.
difficult for the next person to come along. Or
Yeah.
let's just bring a play over from London, or let's get a movie star to do a revival,
Right.
which is not theater. I mean, I love good plays from London, and I love movie stars when they're good on Broadway.
Right.
But that's not, core theater has to be the new American play.
Yeah.
You remember Terry?
Hello, Terry.
She's
Love
in her
Terry.
favorite place. Come here, where are you going?
One thing I'd love to talk about is something I've noticed and loved about all of your plays that I've encountered. I feel like they all, in some way, address art and the sacred role that art plays in our lives. And actually, in almost every play by you that I can think of, the cathartic theatrical moment in each play, it's often about someone making or experiencing art. But I was wondering if that's always been an obsession of yours, sort of the sacred cathartic role that art plays in our lives, or is that something that you became fascinated with after you became a professional artist?
I think it's probably always been there, but I'm more aware of it now. I'm not the kind of writer who's self-consciously, this play is about that. But over the years, you start noticing themes, and art is important to me. One of my favorite lines, it's a very banal line, but I love it. It was at the end of Masterclass where Maria Callas says, she's talking about the importance of art, and she says, if I didn't believe that, and it's just dot, 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 I mean, she would die. She would kill herself. She can't imagine. It's inexpressible what she would feel, a world that did not care at all. I do think arts humanize us, and I think I think art education in our schools is so important, and I do think everyone should have a dog, and I think there would be world peace if everyone had a dog, because dogs really teach you about unconditional love. Dogs need us, they depend on us, and people would realize how we depend on one another and need one another. There'd be a lot less killing and craziness. But art is, I do believe
it's
that.
I mean, art and love, and committed relationships are what save people in your plays.
Yeah.
Maria Callas has that amazing line in Masterclass about, I wrote it down, it's like she talks about singing and how there's a direct line through me to the composer, to Euripides, to Medea herself.
And I believe all that. It probably makes me a bit of a freak to think the art matters. And being 72, I was saying earlier, you want to be relevant to you. I want my plays to matter to you. You're considerably younger. I want to see young people in the seats, but I don't want to negate my history, and I don't want to negate the history before me. And I think there is a way to embrace Shakespeare and go see the wildest, most cutting-edge theater on East 4th Street.
And have it be totally accessible, too.
And you have to have both. I am so glad I know my Shakespeare and my Chekhov, and that I care about these things. You said, do you ever have an apotheosis? I did once in a little theater in Italy. It was a production of Masterclass in Italian, and was done at the theater where the world premiere of Verdi's Macbeth took place. It was the theater where Maria Callas sang her first Medea. Wow. And I'm seeing a play by me, and she's talking about through me, through down to Euripides, down to Medea. I'm going through me, through Maria Callas, through Giuseppe Verdi. And I remember once I was in Italy, and took a bus for about an hour to a village called Le Roncole, where Verdi was born. Verdi's an artist I revere because he kept composing till he was in his 90s. And I wanted to see where he was born, and literally, the house was no bigger than my living room. And the minute the door opened to that house, I'm going to do it now. I started crying. I don't know what it was. That someone of such humble beginnings could want to give the world so much. It just moved me. And I know where I learned that, Mrs. McElroy in high school. Growing up a good Catholic, where you have a sense of the past. And I'm one of the most dry-eyed people you'll ever meet, certainly by my own plays, but just the experience of opening that door and seeing these humble beginnings. And he was an artist.
But I think that's one of the things that's so special about your work is that it's about art making and it's about the past. And I think there's a moment in every one of your plays where sort of the bottom drops out and there's this like sacred, almost spiritual moment where the past is connected to the present, and there's like this feeling of great connection, sort of arcing across the century.
Thank you for seeing that, because I do think it is there. I don't think it's there when I'm writing them. I think when you sit at your keyboard, you have to be, one, unself-conscious and fearless. That's the one thing the critics can do to you that I really resent them when I say, I better not say that. They won't like that, or I'll get in trouble. And remember when I had all the flack over Corpus Christi, I was so frightened it would make me think more cautiously. Oh, better not do that. That'll get people mad. Boy, when you start losing your nerve as a playwright, you're really in trouble.
Have you gone through a period where you felt totally blocked and like
No.
You've always, because you've been incredibly prolific.
Yeah, when I talk to people who say they're stuck trying to write a new play, I sort of try to imagine what that must be like, because I think this city and time we live in, this country, there is so much to talk about. When people say, I don't know what to write about, I like, well, did you read the front page of the Times today?
Yeah.
I also say to young writers, be specific. The more specific you are, the more you will reach other people. It's when you think, oh, this will interest every single man, 40 and above. It reaches no one. So it's really important to focus. And then Mrs. McElroy, who we keep going back to, my high school English teacher, right? What you know about. And there is a truth in that, because I remember I wrote a short story, and the first sentence, this is in high school, in Corpus Christi, Texas, and the first sentence was, Evelyn Johnson toyed with the maraschino cherry in her martini and said to her husband, I want a divorce. And I got it back. Your first sentence made me sick to my stomach. I said, what do you mean, Mrs. McElroy? She said, have you ever had a martini? I said, no. She said, the thought of a maraschino cherry, in a dry martini is so revolting to anyone who's ever had a martini. But on the other hand, writing is the act of the imagination. Shakespeare never left London, as far as they can tell. He went from London to Stratford, from Stratford to London. Yet he wrote plays set in Athens, Rome, Venice, Verona. I guess it's write about things you really care about, and then you'll get the facts right,
Going back to the theme of intimacy in your work and relationships, that's another sort of theme that I don't know, your plays are so romantic, and I mean that in the best possible way, without being cheesy or maudlin or overly optimistic. I feel like your plays are almost all incredibly romantic.
Well, I think all romantics are a little in love with death, and I do think I'm a romantic person, but I do see death is inevitable, and I think we live in a very non-romantic age. I think we live in kind of a high-tech, how many sound bites am I allowed in my lifetime age, and I think people want to write plays are such a reaction to that, because we're saying, no, this is going to take me 2 or 3 hours to tell you this. The theater is such an exciting form of being a creative person, because my novelist friends, they don't know what it's like when an audience gets restless or walks out during an act, or we've all had the play where 30 people put their coats on at intermission, and they're not coming back. Novelists aren't there when you throw the book, say, I'm not going to finish this. So you are dealing in space and time and humanity. There's such an exchange of physical human energy in the theater, which other art forms don't have.
I don't know, I also feel like art is inextricably linked to religion in your plays in a weird way.
Going to India once, I've been twice, a second time for 6 weeks, has had an influence on me. I found being in India very humbling, and I felt suddenly what it meant to be alive on this planet as one human being, and what the insignificance of it, and also the profound power that you don't, you can also, it's a kind of we are just specks, but we also are magnificent specks. And something that happened to me in India, one of the women who was so crazy shopping, and she wants to find the perfect Ganesh, and the salesman or the god says to her, they're all perfect, Margaret. And I think I just started accepting people in life for who they are in a very different way after being in India.
I'm so curious to hear, partly because it's something I have zero experience of and knowledge about, is how different the experience has been writing musicals and writing the books for musicals.
They're real different. Most musicals are adaptations, so you're doing a musical of Ragtime, of Catch Me If You Can, of The Full Monty. So I was trying to get 3 people, composer, lyricist, book writer, to agree on this is how we should tell this story. You also have to leave your playwright's ego really at the back door, because when you write a good scene and a composer writes a great song, 90% of your scene necessarily goes. You don't need it anymore. Music has said it, and if you're fighting to hang on to every line, no matter how good it was, you're going to be unhappy.
So do you write the scene? This is
Yeah,
maybe
I
a
write 'em
really
like
dumb
plays.
question. You write the scene first, and then they write the songs, and then you...
That's how I work. I would write there, so I wrote a play sort of called Ragtime, a play for Lynn and Stephen's eyes only. And then they
That's so
hopefully
interesting.
find music. And if they say, I've read the scene 85 times and I don't see anything, I don't know how to musicalize anything in it, then maybe you have to rewrite it or have a big talk. The best thing I would say is, I think when you're a book writer, if you've done a good book, you're more like the engineering architect. You've done the blueprint for the building, but none of the decorations. And whenever people say, what about writing a musical? I said, choose your collaborators really carefully with the same care you would choose a life partner, because you'll spend what feels like a lifetime. Some of my friends have lived to regret doing a musical, and I think because they've treated it as playwriting light. Oh, this is the easy playwriting. You just leave a blank song here. No, you're in the trenches.
You have to be passionate about
You're in the trenches day and night with the composer and lyricist, is what you should be. But
speaking of collaborators, how have you found your directors? And
by going to the theater a lot.
Yeah.
When I like someone in a play, designer, actor, director, I take the program, circle their name, put it on a card.
I don't want to fall into the bad habit of attributing something one of your characters has said to you, but there's this beautiful line in Masterclass where Maria Callas says, the older I get, she's talking about making art, and she says, the older I get, the less I know, but I am certain that what we do matters. And I was wondering if you feel that way, and why does playwriting matter?
Well, I do believe what we do as artists matters. When Maria Callas says that, the next line is, if I didn't believe that, and she can't finish the sentence, it's because it is so hard to talk about. And if art doesn't matter, then my life has been a great percentage of my waking existence has been spent in vain, and I'm not willing to. And I honestly don't believe that. If you're talking about one other person, 5 other people, it's enough. People have come up to me and said, as a young man, I was very confused about my sexuality, and I saw love, valor, compassion, and it really changed my life.
Yeah. I've talked to so many people who say that about
you can't ask for anything more than that.
Yeah.
And I actually met a woman outside the theater who knitted me this beautiful Afghan, and she said, I have a gay son and gay daughter, and I threw them both out of our house. And then I saw Andre's mother. I picked up the phone, called them, and she said, and this is my daughter, and this is my son. And it was just so beautiful, and that's why you do this too. Anything that makes us feel more connected to our fellow man is important. I think it's so easy for us all to feel alone, somehow, that no one understands me, no one is like me, I am. We are unique people, yes, but there is a bond between people that I think theater makes us realize. And plays have helped me to understand my life more. Death of a Salesman certainly helped me understand my own father more, who was trying to make a go of it, and it was hard. And the play spoke to him, and it still speaks to me now. I think of my family. Long Day's Journey just knocks me out every time I see it. Maybe because I have a brother, and there were just the 4 of us in the house. We didn't have a foghorn, but we had alcohol and our own demons. But somehow I'm comforted when I see that play. And so art has to matter. It has to remind us of our humanity. And otherwise life is just a series of, I don't know, it's too inconsequential without someone pointing out the highlights. Hey, it's not just about raising the kids and being on time and paying your bills. It's about really mattering to other people, how we can hurt one another, how we can help, save, touch, heal one another. And we have to be reminded of it sometimes through art.